Everyone knows Minesweeper. And I do mean everyone. This logic puzzle game would absolutely rank as one of the most recognizable video games of all time. The appeal is obvious. There's just something innately satisfying about taking a blank board and clearing it bit by bit. The rules couldn't be simpler. Each save space will display a number that indicates how many mines the cell is touching. By combining multiple of these clues, players can deduce which other cells are safe to reveal, and in doing so, they are rewarded with more information to continue the process. Each click carries a combination of danger and excitement, which makes the whole experience addicting. If your logic was faulty, or your focus slipped for even a second, it's game over. Win or lose, each round only takes a few minutes, which makes the game a perfect little distraction from whatever important task you should be working on instead. With the help of Minesweeper, I've been procrastinating my work on this video for longer than I'd care to admit. And that's where Minesweeper began for me, a means to goof off in my middle school's computer lab. All the good Flash game websites were blocked, so I was left with the Windows default pack. Everyone knows Solitaire is an old person game, so I was pushed towards Minesweeper by default. What started out as a mindless boredom killer soon turned into something I genuinely looked forward to playing, even in my free time. I distinctly remember getting really into it with some friends at school. We would all start an expert grid at the same time, and frantically race to finish first. Even today, I'll sit at my PC, packed with all the latest AAA heavy hitters, with the express intent of enjoying a Minesweeper marathon session. Of course, it isn't the Microsoft version of the game that I'm playing these days, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. Even if you don't share my passion, maybe Minesweeper is merely an idle time waster in your life, you can't argue against the fact that Minesweeper and its offshoots have been played more than almost any other game in existence. So how about we show some respect? Brief history lesson. The game as we know it was first created by Microsoft in 1990, and came pre-installed on every Windows PC for over 2 decades, until it was unceremoniously removed from Windows 8 in 2012. Chalk one up to Vista for at least maintaining the legacy. Gotta take those wins where you can. The earliest known lowercase minesweeping game is an obscure Spectrum title released in 1983 under the title Mined Out. It's fascinating that in this game, the player controls an avatar and must physically make his way through a mine-infested field, starting from the bottom of the screen and figuring out a safe path to the top. The similarities to proper noun Minesweeper are obvious, but the game gave no incentive for clearing the whole field, or even marking the mines, just for safely crossing with some bonus points for rescuing damsels and achieving a fast time. Developers Kurt Johnson and Robert Donner are credited with creating Windows Minesweeper, but they openly acknowledge that their game was a derivative of an earlier title. Curiously, neither can identify what that earlier title was, but they do recall that it wasn't Mined Out. Pour one out for the mysterious missing link that's been lost to history. With Microsoft's Minesweeper going unchanged and remaining relevant for its entire lifespan, you'd think the simple game didn't leave any room for improvement. It's like Tetris, right? How can you improve Tetris? It's pretty much perfect. Outside of some small refinements in the first couple of revisions, things like tweaking the random distribution of pieces or the ability to hold a piece in reserve, Tetris has always existed in its classic form and never dipped in popularity. Sure, you can add all sorts of gimmicks, but the fancy set dressing adds little more than a fleeting novelty to the core experience. Variants like Tetris Effect admittedly offer some exciting new twists to get you in the door, but anyone who puts serious time into these games is playing out of love for the simple game underneath all the fluff. Minesweeper's no stranger to gimmicky takes either, but that's not what I want to focus on here. Something like 3D Minesweeper might pique your curiosity for a minute, but very quickly you'll realize why the standard game is built the way it is. However, despite its enduring legacy and appeal, the Minesweeper that we all know and love harbors one fatal flaw that holds it back from perfection: a reliance on guesswork. Imagine for me that you're cruising through a Sudoku puzzle when suddenly you get stumped. Determined not to give in to defeat, you keep returning to this puzzle day after day. It haunts your sleep because surely it is solvable if you were just clever enough. The book publisher couldn't possibly include a puzzle that withholds the information required to solve it. Your obsession eventually grows to the point where you write into the publishing house in a desperate plea for closure. You feverishly tear into the envelope containing your response, only to discover that the puzzle was never solvable at all. You just have to guess. Now hopefully no one has ever had that response to an unsolvable Minesweeper board, but in my mind it would be warranted. There exists an unwritten contract between the puzzle maker and the puzzle solver, an implicit promise that sufficient information is provided to solve the puzzle. If that promise is broken, all trust is shattered and any motivation to engage with the challenge evaporates. I can't give an exact number obviously, but a shockingly large percentage of Minesweeper runs will actually end with a guess. However, even if it were an incredibly minuscule fraction of games, the point would still stand. With the knowledge that there's a chance, however small, for any given puzzle to not be solvable in the back of my mind, why would I waste my time trying to work through an especially perplexing cluster of squares? Anytime I get stuck for even a couple of minutes, I'm just going to give up and take the 50-50. Maybe that puzzle actually was solvable, but without a guarantee, I'm not going to take the time to figure it out for sure. To be fair, the guessing isn't always purely a coin flip. Often there is room for intelligent guesswork. Each mine configuration is equally likely as any other, so by drawing out every possible configuration, you can determine which square is least likely to contain a mine. Furthermore, there is some strategy in avoiding situations that would require guessing, and an art to guessing in pursuit of squares that would provide the most information. As an example, could you tell me if this configuration is solvable? With the answer not immediately obvious, how long are you willing to work on it, knowing there's a high probability it isn't solvable? In this case, a guess is actually required. We just don't have the necessary information to narrow down to one unique solution. There are actually 5 possible mine configurations, each just as likely as the next to be the actual solution. Our best guess, anything other than the top right and bottom right cells, has an 80% chance of being safe. How disappointed are you going to be if you get unlucky on that dice roll? Even if you do survive that guess, there is a strong chance the next move will necessitate yet another guess. You can see how unsatisfying this board has become. Frustrated at that anticlimactic puzzle, you shake it off and start fresh on a new board. Fast forward to this configuration and we ask the same question. Is it solvable or is guessing required? After just getting burned, if you're anything like me, you're just going to throw your hands up, assume the worst, and take the guess rather than stopping to truly evaluate your options. You cheated yourself here because in this case you actually can solve it. Regardless if any given puzzle is solvable or not, the possibility of an unsolvable state makes it very difficult to earnestly engage with the game whenever it gets tough. There is still depth to Minesweeper for sure, but by digging into that depth, too often you'll just uncover the rotten core that infects the entire game's design. Thankfully, it takes no effort at all for modern computers to simply generate thousands of mine layouts, and then run them through some solving algorithm to determine if they are solvable through logic alone. Those the computer failed to solve would therefore require guessing, and are tossed out. The player is only presented with an approved collection of solvable boards. It's like receiving an older sibling's hand-me-down puzzle book, with all of the bad puzzles ripped out. This no-guess version of Minesweeper is a straight upgrade of the traditional Microsoft version as far as I'm concerned. There are no added frills, it just removes any potential for frustrating dead ends, with a very simple change to the formula. You could absolutely stop here, but after some time with this improved version of Minesweeper, I think a new issue will eventually come to light. While the puzzles may be curated for solvability, they are absolutely not curated for quality. Just because a puzzle is possible to be solved doesn't mean it will be a satisfying experience to solve. An overwhelming majority of no-guess boards are a total cakewalk for an experienced player. Simply put, there are often way more clues than necessary, and other than the occasional bottleneck where the path forward isn't immediately obvious, the player can often shut their brain off in autopilot. Once you play enough Minesweeper, the common patterns get ingrained in your brain, and you don't even have to think about how to solve the 1-2-1 or the 1-2-2-1 on a wall. This does offer a relaxing Zen-like appeal, but I hope we can agree that the most rewarding puzzles are those that really make you stop and think. Obviously, an algorithm can't satisfactorily separate out the good puzzles for us, so at this point we turn to the irreplicable human touch. Independent developer Matthew Brown's game, Hexcells, is my favorite example of this branch of Minesweeper offshoots. While obviously this game utilizes hexagons rather than squares, and therefore has different patterns, the logic remains the same. That being said, Not every safe cell will give clues about the surrounding spaces. That would limit the challenge severely, as we just discussed. Clues are also much more varied than in traditional Minesweeper, to limit the impact of recurring patterns. Some clues will tell you how many mines are within a radius of 2 hexes. There are modifiers for the traditional adjacent mine clues. A bracket indicates that the adjacent mines are all also adjacent to each other, and a hyphen indicates that they are not. As a Picross fan, I particularly enjoy the inclusion of line clues that provide a mine count along a row, column, or diagonal of the entire board. All of these open up new methods to fairly challenge the player, and when taken all together give Matthew Brown plenty of tools to craft a wide variety of fun puzzles. There is an included random level generator for infinite procedural puzzles, but the main draw of Hexcells is the 100+ puzzles spread across 3 level packs that set themselves apart with consistently thoughtful design. The first pack functions as a welcoming tutorial that trains players in preparation for the challenges to be found in Hexcells Plus and Hexcells Infinite. Those ramp up in a smooth difficulty curve that assumes players have mastered the mechanics presented in prior levels. Even the most seasoned Minesweeper player will inevitably reach a point where they have to really work their mind to progress, but thanks to the organic training provided by the game itself, that success is within reach for all players. I'm not going to proclaim that every single puzzle feels completely unique, but they all do have some sense of identity in their solutions. An undersung differentiator with Hexcells is that you're given multiple seeds to work off of. In traditional Minesweeper games, you start with one seed square and gradually spread outward until you cover the entire board. With multiple starting points in Hexcells, you often have multiple puzzles ongoing on the same board at the same time. If you get stumped on one side, you can spend some time on another side of the board, and maybe when you return with fresh eyes, the solution will present itself. Then, when these solved zones spread to the point where they are about to conjoin, you always end up with some interesting combination of clues to work with. I hope I've made it clear how much of a game changer creatively human-designed puzzles are to this formula. It's hard to properly convey in words, but it's very easily felt when solving. Even if they don't reach the heights of the main levels themselves, I am thankful for the inclusion of an endless supply of procedurally generated levels as a side dish. With its tranquil music and sound cues, its clean interface, and the naturally relaxing vibe of Minesweeper-style games, Hexcells functions incredibly well as a chill way to unwind. The procedural levels aren't as demanding as the main levels, or as satisfying to solve, but I can't deny they aren't still innately fun. When I'm just looking for a soothing solve before bed, a never-ending stream of fair puzzles is sure hard to turn down. If this still wasn't enough content for you, there's a whole suite of user-submitted puzzles as well. These are more hit or miss in my experiences. Many wannabe puzzle designers don't quite have the chops required to offer a compelling solve, especially when compared to the masterful design of the main levels. Even in the best of these player-made levels, the clean design of Hexcells is often lost in the arms race to craft the most unique mechanics. It is worth checking out some of the top-rated levels, if only to see just how far this genre can be stretched with bewildering sentence clues. Taken all together, the extensive collection of masterfully designed puzzles, the infinite supply of fun-enough procedural creations, and a look at the internet's most outlandish Minesweeper puzzles, the low price of $9 for the complete pack is a total steal. Don't even get me started on the sub $3 sale price the set regularly drops to on Steam. I'd actually fear arrest at that price point. I generally avoid turning these videos into advertisements, even for games that I adore, but I can't recommend these enough. For what it's worth, I've managed to get several of my friends aboard as well, and they've all had a blast too. It's not just me. While the main takeaway from this video should be to drop everything and play Hexcells, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to briefly highlight a couple other Minesweeper-like games that have each consumed dozens of hours of my life. If you are an absolute god at Minesweeper, the natural progression from Hexcells is Tametsi, where the first level set of Hexcells acts as a tutorial for the rest of the game. The entirety of Hexcells acts as a tutorial for Tametsi. I felt confident in my skills after conquering Hexcells, but Tametsi disagreed and humbled me in no time flat. The game is brutally difficult, yet still retains a strict adherence to purely logical solutions. Your skills from Minesweeper and Hexcells definitely transfer, but Tametsi does play differently in subtle but significant ways. The number of remaining mines on the board is an often overlooked clue in Minesweeper, only coming into play at the very end of the puzzle. Tametsi brings more depth to this clue by adding different colors to each tile and keeping a running tally of the remaining mines for each color independently. This is a really smart way to make this clue relevant for the entire solve, not just the last couple of moves. While that is definitely a cool innovation, the most exciting change Tametsi brings to the table is all of the different shapes that tiles can take. These all have to be thought of differently when solving, and the way two different types of shapes can slot together is highly intriguing from a puzzle perspective. I'll admit the skill required to solve all of these levels is beyond my level, which is largely why I didn't enjoy it to the extent I adored Hexcells. There is a fine line between a satisfying challenge that makes you feel like a genius once overcome, and a grueling one that just makes you feel like a sad idiot. I'll shamelessly take the former any day. Still, Tametsi is well worth checking out if you want to really prove your mettle. Just don't expect to come out on top. On the opposite end of the spectrum from polished handcrafted puzzles, we have 14 Minesweeper Variants. It's exactly what it sounds like, a large collection of interesting Minesweeper gimmick rules and a never-ending supply of procedurally generated puzzles for each of them. This is the best option for when standard Minesweeper has grown stale. Each of these variants offers a unique experience, each with their own strategies and patterns to learn. There are so many little quirks and intricacies to discover, and they all make you think in totally different ways. I find it best to cycle between different variants often, so as to never get too comfortable in any one. By the time you loop back around to a previously conquered rule set, you'll have to shake the rust off and relearn it all over again. Each puzzle type abides by the no guessing rule of any good Minesweeper, and actually goes one step further. Not only is guessing not required, it's not allowed. With every move the player makes, the game checks to see if there is a possible permutation of mines that would make your move invalid, thus indicating that the move wasn't based on sound logic. I love this feature, and frequently get called out for making assumptions. It's always enlightening to see where I went wrong. Most of the variants on offer are a significant step up in difficulty compared to vanilla, but two of the variants I actually found to be a good bit easier. Those being Quad, in which each 2x2 area must contain at least one mine, and Multiple, in which the board follows a checkerboard pattern, and mines in colored cells count as 2 when counting adjacents. After getting your footing in these rule sets, you'll realize that the twist actually only serves to provide the player with extra information in solving. Another much more difficult variant, Liar, is one of my favorites. The number of adjacent mines to each cell is actually either one higher or one lower than what is listed. The best rule sets play like that, recognizable to vanilla Minesweeper, but with a twist just impactful enough to change how you play the game. Two others like this are Balance, each row and column has the same number of mines, and Negation, where each cell's clue tells you the difference in number of adjacent mines and adjacent safe cells. I often get so focused on these gimmick rule sets that I completely overlook standard Minesweeper logic, which absolutely still applies. I wasn't a fan of the more outlandish variants that aren't as recognizably Minesweeper. Take Eyesight, for example. Instead of the number of adjacent mines, given clues tell you the number of uninterrupted non-mine cells in each of the 4 cardinal directions. Puzzles like this do sound intriguing, but I struggle to get on board when the rule set is so foreign. There's no training period or smooth difficulty curve like with Hexcells. The game just drops you in and expects you to figure it out. This has the potential to be a very rewarding process for those determined enough, but for me it just gives me a headache. I appreciate the inclusion of a markup feature in 14 variants, but unfortunately its inclusion speaks to an issue inherent in the puzzle designs. Too often in these randomly generated puzzles, the strategy devolves into drawing out different possible mine layouts to see if you notice any commonality or impossible scenarios. In other words, trial and error, which is never a fun way to solve a puzzle. To be clear, the ability to take notes is a great inclusion in isolation, but frequently the type of puzzle that requires note-taking lacks the polished and clean vision that I'm looking for. As you can tell, my praise for 14 Minesweeper Variants comes with more caveats than Hexcells and other handcrafted experiences on offer. There is still fun to be had, but it's like junk food, only really recommended after you've already had your fill of the main course. So yeah, Minesweeper is a really fun game and deserves more respect, but leaves room for improvement. The best games to branch off from that foundation are those that reject guesswork and lean into the elevated design that can only be derived from the human touch. It's tempting to go into a whole diatribe about the danger presented by the rise of AI tools in game development, but that might be stretching the limits of a Minesweeper video, so I'll keep my message simple. You should really play Hexcells. I realize this video was sort of all over the place, but it was something I wanted to discuss regardless. I really have no idea how to tidily wrap up a Minesweeper analysis, so I'll just leave it at that. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and shout out to my patrons who have gone above and beyond in supporting my channel. Axel Deeker, Sarah Marguerite, and Andreas Schouten. You guys are awesome. And to everyone, until next time, take care.